Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, I was watching this TV show called Dare Me, and in a recent episode, there's this Marine, Sarge Will, he was involved with the cheer coach, who's one of the main characters, played by Willa Fitzgerald, and the guy is played by Zach Rohrig, not that that matters. But anyway, his character dies, apparent suicide, and so then, like, the kids are all, like, some of them are sad because they kind of knew him, like the ones that were thinking about joining the Marines, and because he was a Marine recruiter. I don't know if I said that before. And then so all the kids, like, kind of, some of them want to have a party or whatever to, like, remember him, but the other ones just come because they just want an excuse to have just a drink or whatever. But so they go to this, like, abandoned warehouse or factory or something, and then they're, like, drinking. And then one of the kids who knew Sarge Will, because he was, like, talking to him a lot and stuff, he was thinking of joining the Marines, he holds up his phone with its light on, like it's a cigarette lighter at a concert or something, right? And then more of the kids do it, and then they're all doing it, right? And as I was watching this, I'm thinking, how does that mean anything? And then I thought, okay, well, I guess they're running down the batteries on their phones faster by using their phone like it's a flashlight or like it's a lighter. They're using up their phone's battery quicker, so later they might not have access to their phone. There might be a little while without being able to use their phone because they'll have to recharge it, and that's kind of a sacrifice because people these days are completely addicted to their phones. And then I thought, yeah, sacrifice is kind of how you honor people or prove that you appreciate something. So then that's something I want to expound on in this video, this idea of sacrifice being how you honor people or prove that you appreciate something. Also, there was that scene from Jack Reacher where the Zek, the bad guy of the first Jack Reacher movie, I think he was played by that director, Wolfgang Peterson, I think it was. He tells that guy that he bit off his frostbitten fingers in Siberia, or like at least like 3 or 4 of them, so he wouldn't die of gangrene. And the other fingers he bit off, or no, he didn't bite them off. He lost the other fingers somehow in Siberia. So he's got like only 1 or 2 fingers left, out of all 10 fingers, between both hands, he's got 1 or 2 fingers left. He's got like a pinky and maybe something else. I can't remember. So then this one employee that he has fucks up, right? And then he tells the employee to, like, bite off one of his fingers or whatever, or implies that he wants him to. He says, prove to me that you want to live. Prove to me that you will do anything to survive. Then the guy has trouble doing it. He's trying to, like, bite his finger off, but he can't do it. And the Zek is like, you can do it. Encouraging him because he's only going to let him live if he bites it off. And he's going to kill him if he doesn't bite it off. Because only if he bites it off will he learn his lesson and not fuck up again. Will he be so invested that he'll be much more careful next time. But, the Zek doesn't want to keep him around again if he's not going to be way more careful next time. Because he's going to be the same fuck up he was before and he'll just screw up again. You see, this makes a lot of sense, right? And I want to point out that this is actually not a retarded movie reference in that, like, movies aren't real. Because the Yakuza actually did used to do that. Except for, I don't think they bit their fingers off, but they did, like, if a Yakuza fucked up, they would cut off the first segment of his pinky. And then if he fucked up again, they would cut off the next segment of his pinky. And then if he fucked up again, they would cut off the last segment of his pinky. And then if he fucked up again, they'd go on to the first segment of his ring finger. You see, because when you hold a sword, the most important fingers are the thumb and the index finger. So they start with your least important finger. And then they go up, 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 for every mistake you make until finally, eventually you wouldn't even be able to hold a sword anymore, So that's far more rational. It's far more gradual than what the Zek was doing. The Yakuza only did 1 finger segment at a time rather than whole fingers at a time. But yeah, the Yakuza used to do that. I don't know if they still do or not. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But yeah, that was a real thing, So the point is that sacrifice is something that enables you to prove that you have value or that something else had value or has value. Maybe that's what human sacrifice of an innocent person was about in certain cultures that existed in the ancient past. Maybe it was about proving that life has value, and maybe in order to keep civilization going and to appease the powerful but cruel and capricious gods, because they were so superstitious and scientifically ignorant back then, to them, it seemed that, there were gods that controlled the wind and the rain and lightning and all this, and that these gods were cruel and capricious because, everything is random, right? or at least semi-random, to a degree random, right? So, they felt they had to appease these powerful but cruel and capricious gods so that they could keep civilization going, and they felt they had no choice but to sacrifice an innocent person to make that happen, to appease the gods. So the truth is that sacrifice gives meaning to life. And there's this idea, this same idea of sacrificing people also exists in many books and movies, etc., such as the excellent Black Sun Rising by C.S. Friedman, the first of the Cold Fire trilogy. Also in Legacies Season 2, when the necromancer kills his friend in order to get his power back. And in that movie King Arthur, The Legend of the Sword, where Jude Law's character sacrifices his wife and then his daughter to get power. In these kinds of books and movies, there's the idea you can sacrifice a loved one to gain power, supernatural power. So in this kind of sense, in a sense, this is kind of the same idea. You gain power from sacrifice. Sacrifice kind of takes you to the next level. It proves that you're serious. It proves that you're invested in this thing that you've sacrificed for, because now you don't want to go back on it because you've sacrificed for it. It's serious business now. You're invested. It's like, if you lose a loved one to something, you don't want to go back on that thing. Like how many people typically don't hate the military, even after their son or daughter, usually son, dies in the military. They don't hate it. They don't hate the military after that because they're invested in believing in the military now because they lost their son to the military. So they can't face the truth that perhaps the U.S. military is evil and that that's why their son is dead. And that their son's death is partially their own fault because they should have taught their son the evil of war and the foolishness of joining the military, right? But they didn't teach their son that, and so they don't want to accept that they were bad parents and that the U.S. military and the government are evil, and so their son's death just makes them more invested in believing in the idea that the U.S. military is justified in its wars and virtuous and deserving of loyalty. So you see these parents who have lost a son in the military, their son is dead because of fighting in wars. They will often be like even more gung-ho on the military than anybody. You know what I mean? We don't have to sacrifice innocent people, though, and we don't have to sacrifice things that don't need to be sacrificed. So this is not about... so what I'm advocating here is not that we actually sacrifice things. What I'm advocating that we do is that we recognize when a tragedy happens as a result of having freedom, because, when you have unlimited freedom, you will have a lot of deaths that happen that don't even happen today or don't happen as much today. Right? Like people driving around without their seatbelt and getting killed when there's an accident. They fly through their own windshield and die. Like that kind of stuff will happen under anarcho-capitalism. But so what? Like, you have to view those quote-unquote preventable deaths as just something that's an inevitable consequence of having freedom. And you have to see that freedom is worth it because tyranny will not stop those deaths from happening anyway, for the most part. And there will be even more deaths under tyranny due to war and stuff. Right? So the amount of deaths that happen under ANCAP will still be way, way less, even though you'll have more of certain kinds of deaths that today happen less, right? Maybe those particular deaths under ANCAP, like, flying through your windshield because you weren't wearing a seatbelt, maybe those particular deaths and others like that would have been saved by getting rid of freedom like we have today, where we have almost no freedom. But way more people overall die when you have tyranny. So ultimately, you cannot save more lives by restricting freedom, by increasing tyranny. It just results in more lives being lost in other ways, and maybe even in the same ways. Right? Like they keep acting like we can cut down gun violence by gun control. So they want endless gun control. They just keep passing progressively more and more and more restrictive gun control, but it never stops the deaths. And even under complete gun control, the criminals will still get guns, and there'll still be gun crime. You see, so it doesn't even stop a lot of these deaths anyway. So, and plus, having statism allows war, which is the hugest source of death. So you have to accept that loss, death, tragedy, quote-unquote, preventable deaths happen when you have unlimited freedom. This is inevitable. This is unavoidable, at least at present, and will probably remain unavoidable for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Even if we institute anarcho-capitalism today, the unnecessary deaths will not stop for hundreds, maybe thousands of years until we've massively evolved as the human species. I'm talking like, hundreds or thousands of IQ points per person and just like maybe infinite life. And like until we're super evolved, I mean like barely even human anymore, this kind of stuff is just going to keep on happening. And we have to view those lives that are lost as inevitable. And we have to view those lives that are lost kind of like how ancient people viewed a human sacrifice. People of the ancient past, yeah, maybe they did it partially because they were savage, maybe a little bit sadistic, but maybe a lot of it wasn't sadism or cruelty or savagery. Maybe a fair amount of it, 50 to 75%, maybe all of it, that is the reason why they did those human sacrifices. Maybe most or all of the reason was just because they didn't want to do it, but they viewed it as this thing that they had to do to, stop the gods from destroying them all. Maybe they viewed it as like the gods are powerful and cruel, so we have to sacrifice this innocent person to appease the gods so that the rest of us can survive. It's not necessarily a case of them hating the sacrificial victim or the sacrificers being sadistic. It's perhaps that they viewed the gods as powerful and merciless, and so they felt they had to appease these gods so that the rest of the tribe could survive. They probably would have preferred to not do the sacrifices, but they thought they had to do it so that everyone else could survive. After all, the parents of the sacrifice victim almost certainly were not in favor of it, and everybody else had to realize that next time it could be their kid that has to be sacrificed, right? So why would they do that unless they thought that it was for the ultimate good, that it was absolutely necessary? Why would they do it otherwise? You know what I mean? So I think that's how we have to view the loss of life and other things that happen under absolute freedom, like anarcho-capitalism, or even under libertarianism. There will be a lot of deaths, like people flying through their windshield because they're not wearing a seatbelt. There'll be a lot of those kind of deaths under libertarianism too. So not just under anarcho-capitalism. So, whether losses take the form of life or loss of money or other things, and whether they happen under anarcho-capitalism or libertarian, we have to view those losses as, just the cost of freedom. The more freedom you have, the more seemingly preventable deaths there are going to be, which maybe actually could have been prevented. But that doesn't mean that it's better to have tyranny. It doesn't mean it's better to lose freedom in order to prevent just a few deaths, because, that's the price of freedom. Freedom is valuable, incredibly valuable, not just in terms of prosperity and technological development, but also in terms of just quality of life. Freedom is of incalculable value. And so to sacrifice freedom just to save a few lives is insane. The price of freedom is a few people dying every year, and that's far better than tyranny, because under tyranny, millions of people die due to endless war, not to mention all the slavery and poverty and everybody getting robbed. And theft, like Frank Herbert said, is just murder in a smaller degree, because you're stealing their life. You're stealing the amount of life. In other words, the time that it took to make that money. So by stealing their money, you are stealing their life. Like if you're a government and you steal 25% of the money of all the citizens through, various taxes, like property tax, income tax, sales tax, inflation, and all the other kinds of taxes, tickets, etc. If you steal, on average, 25% of the money that people make over their lifetime, you've literally stolen 25% of their lifetime, basically. Obviously, I suppose you can't say that you've stolen 25% of the years that they lived before they started working a job at 16 or 18 or whatever, but like after that point, from that point to even all the way to their death, even after they retire, you have stolen all those years of a quarter of all those years of their life if you steal a quarter of their money over their lifetime. So Frank Herbert is right. Theft is murder. It's just a matter of degree. So it's not just a matter of the mass murder of wars that you get when you have statism. It's also the mass murder of theft that you get when you have laws, when you have government, when you have the tyranny that always accompanies statism. And again, that theft is murder. So especially when you don't just steal a little, like a 1 or 5% tax, but you're stealing, 20, 30% of their money, that is taking years, if not decades, off their lifetime. That is insane. That is murder. So these just like if you kill a guy who's 60 years old and he only had another 10 years to live because he wasn't in great health or whatever, he's probably going to be dead at 70 or 75, that's still murder according to the law, right? And it should be, because you stole the last 10 to 15 years of his life. I don't think you should go to jail for as long if you kill a 60-year-old as if you kill a 15-year-old, like maliciously kill a 15-year-old, not accidentally. Like if you murder your 21-year-old girlfriend, you should go to jail for way longer than you go to jail for killing like a 60 or 65-year-old guy or girl, because they don't have much years left. But it's still murder. It's still wrong. You know what I mean? So that's what theft is. It's murdering part of a person, So, these quote-unquote preventable deaths, many of which actually could be prevented with various laws and rules or whatever, those deaths should be viewed as unavoidable, like a sacrifice of a virgin to an angry god. You have to view that stuff as just the price of freedom. Like, it's unfortunate, I wish it hadn't happened, but we need to honor this person as like a sacrifice. We didn't want him to die, but we wish he had not died. If he had been more careful or more lucky, he would not have died, but we have to accept that these deaths are going to continue to happen. There's going to continue being drunk driving deaths. There's going to continue to be heroin overdoses. There's going to continue to be murders of innocent people and revenge deaths where revenge is accidentally taken on the wrong person. There's going to be all kinds of stuff like that under anarcho-capitalism. There's going to be all kinds of stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that we should restrict freedom and get rid of this great ANCAP society that we have. Right, like that should be the attitude of people under ANCAP. You know, that's just how it is. Tons of preventable deaths will happen under ANCAP. You should not stop it or try to prevent it, especially not by passing any laws or otherwise restricting people. Your first concern should be, can this be prevented in a way that does not infringe on freedom in the slightest? Because if you could prevent some of those deaths, then maybe you could create a new invention. And then maybe you could get rich doing that. And maybe a lot of people choose to voluntarily use that invention. So then you're saving lives, but you're not passing any laws demanding that people have, demanding that car companies put seatbelts into their cars and not demanding that people use the seatbelts or else you give them a ticket. You don't need that bullshit. Most people use it anyway. And if they don't, so what? That's Darwinianism, you know what I mean? A lot of them are going to fly through their windshield. And it's not a good thing, but, in a sense it kind of is because it's Darwinian. The people who are more careful lived and passed on their genes. You know what I mean? So, then only the people who are wisely courageous get to live. And then that's fine. You know what I mean? Like there's no need to mandate the safety stuff. None of it. And not just safety stuff, but anything really. There's no need to mandate anything. Like if you were the first, like if we had an ANCAP society and the first seatbelt was invented then under ANCAP, everyone would be like, whoa, this is weird. Like, do you want to wear one of those? It's so weird. But on the other hand, like, I don't want to go flying through my windshield when I get in an accident like so many people do. So then, some people would start using it and some people wouldn't. And that's fair, that's free, that's Darwinian. You know what I mean? And eventually over time, probably everybody would start using them because better safe than sorry, But that doesn't mean you have to pass laws and force people to use it. Doesn't mean you have to restrict freedom. So, like, there would still be these same types of inventions, and they'd still probably get quite popular. But it should always be the person's choice whether they want to use that kind of invention or not. You know what I mean? So, there's really no reason to force this stuff on anybody, because you can create these inventions and cut down on the number of deaths, but, that doesn't necessitate restricting freedom, You just give people the option. The whole point is to have unlimited freedom, Like I said, tons of preventable deaths will happen under ANCAP, but you shouldn't stop it or try to prevent it by passing laws or otherwise restricting people forcibly, because if you do so, then that undermines the very point of anarcho-capitalism. The whole point is to have unlimited freedom. And if you have unlimited freedom, then yeah, some people are going to die, but so what? That doesn't mean that freedom's not worth it. It doesn't mean you should restrict the people freedom have in order to save more lives. Quality of life matters as well, and quality of life always declines when freedom is infringed upon. What's the point of saving lives when saving those lives necessitates ruining the quality of those lives that those saved people will have to live? At a certain point, life becomes not worth living, and we're basically at that point now. When it comes to the preventable deaths that happen under ANCAP, you gotta view those deaths as like a sacrifice to an angry god. It's unpleasant, but it's the price of freedom. And if you view it that way, if you view it as a sacrifice, then it gives life meaning. It gives freedom meaning. It gives everything more meaning when people die tragically. Now, tragic deaths are not a good thing. I'm not in favor of them happening. I'm not trying to romanticize tragic deaths. But it is true that tragedy does give meaning to life, because if no one ever died, then life would have less meaning. Maybe no meaning, right? Even if we still all died at 80 or 90 years old, but nobody died before then, life would still have less meaning. Like, it's the very fact that you could die that gives some meaning to life. I'm not saying that life would have no meaning without death. I'm not sure I'm of that belief, but I think that life would have less meaning, or there would be less appreciation of life if no one ever died, not even of old age, especially if no one even ever died of old age, like in the movie In Time, then that would be a case of like, just like in that movie, like she's talking about, remember how they're dancing in the ballroom in her father's house or whatever, and she says something like, the poor die young and the rich don't live. That's what she says, Amanda Seyfried's character. Remember that? I assume you've seen that movie. It's really good. If you haven't, you should. I didn't appreciate it at first. A lot of the really good movies you watch and then you think, or at least me, I'll watch it and then I'll think, man, that was okay. I thought it was like a B movie, it was decent, it wasn't bad, but I don't think I love it or anything, But then if you watch it a few more times, you realize every time you watch it, it gets better, and you realize, wow, this movie's way better than I thought, right? That's one of those movies. Same with This Is 40. That movie is great. I love that movie, and it massively grew on me. I didn't love it at first either, but yeah, like in that movie, In Time, like they point out that like the rich live these, idle, meaningless lives. They live forever, whereas the poor are dying very young, because in the movie, you only get to live to 25, I think it is, and then your clock starts, this little clock on your forearm, and then you have to earn the life that you have after that. And you can live forever if you can keep earning enough life. Otherwise, your clock runs out and then you instantly die of a heart attack, right? And in that movie, the rich don't appreciate life. The poor, die young, but the rich, they don't live. They don't appreciate life. They don't enjoy their lives because it's all so easy and safe and everything. There's no risk. There's nothing. You know what I mean? There's no risk, so no reason to live. No vividness of life or anything. So I think it's definitely the case that I think it's definitely true. Life has less meaning, or people appreciate it less if there is no old age, no death, etc. And that will eventually be the case in the future. But hopefully, we'll be smarter and wiser, and we won't let that ruin our appreciation of life because we'll be wiser. But I don't know, maybe we'll just become super calm and mellow or something. And so we won't mind that life is kind of boring or whatever. I don't know. But like, when people who know someone who's died, a father, a brother, a close friend, when people know someone who's died, it gives a totally different view of life to those people who knew the person who died, but who did not die themselves, whether they were in a car accident and survived, where their friend or relative did not, or whether they were never in any danger and their family or friend died, their family member or friend died somewhere else at some other time. Like either way, whether the person who lived was ever in any danger or not, it still changes their life and their view of life when someone close to them dies. They have more appreciation of the frailty of life, the suddenness of death, the shortness of life, the reality of life, and how ego and greed and things like that are bullshit. And the things that matter are compassion, fidelity, kindness, humbleness, valuing the moment, and not being an asshole. People who have seen death have a different appreciation of life, and this is a good thing. This is a good and necessary thing. And this is one of the benefits, one of the side effects of having seemingly preventable deaths happen under anarcho-capitalism. So you should not view those deaths as a tragedy that needs to be fixed like the people of today do. People of today act like children. They act like immature idiot kids, acting like, we have to prevent every tragic death. No, this is a childish, retarded attitude. We need to honor those deaths by appreciating those lives and appreciating the rest of the lives that survive, and appreciating the fact that, it's necessary that we have freedom and it resulted in this person's death, and we appreciate their, in a sense, their unintentional sacrifice by dying. We should appreciate those deaths and appreciate their necessity, because they are necessary under ANCAP. Not that we cause them under ANCAP, we don't cause them, but they are allowed to happen under ANCAP because there's freedom. So we honor them and the necessity that those deaths are allowed to happen by not trying to stop those deaths. That's how we honor them, because by trying to stop those deaths, you create tyranny, and by creating tyranny, you ensure that even more deaths will happen, and that the people who don't die will be miserable because of theft and degeneracy promoted by government and the corporations that own the government, etc. So we need to honor these preventable deaths that happen as a result of having freedom, because in a sense, they're not preventable. Because you can either have freedom, in which you do have some deaths, or you can have no freedom, in which case you don't have those deaths perhaps, but you have way more deaths in other forms. So totally eliminating death is, at least at present, and probably for decades, if not hundreds of years, preventing all deaths will remain impossible. Maybe it won't be for thousands or tens of thousands of years before we've completely eliminated death. And until then, we have to just honor those deaths that happen, because we need to realize that all deaths, it's impossible to prevent all deaths. We have to realize that, and we have not yet realized that as a culture. At least America hasn't. I think the Chinese are totally accepting of this fact, but the Chinese are quite callous and lacking in compassion, if you ask me. And they're not terribly honest either. And so I'm not advocating this because I admire the Chinese or I want us to be cruel and callous and cold like the Chinese. I'm saying we can have compassion just like we do, and at the same time have the wisdom to realize that these deaths are not actually preventable, even though they seem like it. And then we honor those deaths, those people who died, by not trying to prevent those deaths into the future. You see, we honor them by not trying to prevent those deaths, but instead appreciating their significance in the scheme of things, in sustaining anarcho-capitalism, giving value to life, etc. So, that's the deal. That is part of anarcho-capitalism. That is the place, the proper place of tragedy and death and loss in society. And once we mature as a society and a species, we will realize this. Instead of continuing to act like, we gotta stop tragedies, that was a preventable death, we have to institute new laws and rules to make sure this never happens again. Never again, never again. Mothers against drunk driving, change the law, change the law. This is how children act, as if death can be prevented if we just pass enough laws. This is absolutely immature and stupid, and we really need to stop tolerating this kind of immaturity. And only when we stop tolerating this kind of retarded immaturity and start saying, no, not all deaths are preventable, and even the ones that are preventable, you can't stop them all. You can't stop them all, not without taking away all freedom, and that is utterly hellish in quality of life and in effect on the world. Because then who does that power go to? It goes to somewhere, and it goes to the government. And then you have absolute tyranny and mass death and just the utter horror that goes along with having a huge government, which we should already be able to see. Mass surveillance, torture of innocent people overseas, and CIA rendition black sites, all that stuff. And endless war, etc. We need to start saying, no, not all deaths are preventable. We need to stop acting as if they are. And even if they are preventable, we need to recognize that restricting freedom to stop preventable deaths is taking a cure, a medicine, which is far worse than the disease. We need to start accepting deaths so that we can stop sacrificing freedom for security. That's what we need to start saying. When we do this, we will grow the fuck up, and perhaps it's a cyclical thing, because I think the people of the past understood this principle that I'm talking about in this video. But then again, they never had the luxury that we have, the safety that we have. So we need to rediscover this truth. And if we do it, it'll be the first time in human history that this truth has been accepted, despite the the existence of high technology and the high level of safety that we have. They accepted it in the past only because they had to, because there was no high technology, no extreme safety. But we need to rediscover this truth, in the presence of safety and high technology, which has never yet been done. The more advanced technology gets, the more people act like we need to crack down on freedom and prevent deaths. It's ridiculous. Of course, I actually think what's really happening is that, the government is using women and liberals to, rile them up, is riling these kind of people up, riling up the women, riling up the liberal men, and getting them to agitate for greater laws to restrict freedom and the government does this using the pretext of increasing safety and saving lives. But obviously, being a government that wages endless war and kills millions of people, the government doesn't care about life. The government's just actually using the liberals and the women to, get the public to advocate for its own enslavement. You see, that's what's really happening. So, I don't think this is a grassroots thing. This is not actually bottom down. It's top down. I mean, it's not bottom up, it's top down. The elites are tricking us into advocating for more laws that, supposedly save lives, like forcing us to wear seatbelts and stuff. And then, what's really happening is they're just cracking down on freedom, getting us used to an increasing level of slavery. You don't have to get rid of the safety, not in a sense. You just bring about peace, like, under anarcho-capitalism. You don't have to get rid of the safety of society, not really. You just bring about real peace, real freedom, etc. And then once you have real peace and freedom and stuff, people will still be dying, but they'll be dying in far less numbers under ANCAP, even though they'll still be dying once in a while, here and there. So yeah, in a sense, the freedom will be causing or allowing death, but it will be, on the whole, saving way more lives than will be allowed to be lost. So, you know, if you're against war, if you want the smallest number of deaths, you don't. It's like that saying, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. People, by trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of freedom just to have a few less deaths, this is retarded, because this perfect that they're reaching for can never even be reached. And yet they're gonna sacrifice the most important thing there is, freedom, just to try to even get a little bit closer to that perfect, even though they can never arrive at it, because there will always be deaths. You know. So, like I said, we will be saving way more lives under ANCAP than will be allowed to be lost. Then we'll be dying as an increase because of being allowed to be lost, like, not wearing seatbelts and stuff. So, if you're against war, if you want the fewest number of deaths in society, it's important to realize that it's impossible to eliminate all deaths in society. So you just have to choose the society that has the least number of deaths. And ANCAP is the society with the least number of deaths. ANCAP will accomplish this by preventing war, preventing environmental destruction, which could kill billions eventually if we keep on doing what we're doing. So, when we grow up and realize this, we will be able to institute ANCAP. And if we realize this and we keep this realization under ANCAP, that is, everybody under ANCAP continues to, pass this wisdom on so that nobody gets deluded, so that everybody remembers that this is the truth. If that's the case, then, you're going to be able to keep that realization. You're going to be able to keep ANCAP for a long time if you keep this realization under ANCAP. And we will all be, ANCAP will be able to help it. Will be able to be kept if you keep this realization, and if everybody under ANCAP is moral and courageous, and if everybody under ANCAP is freedom absolutists. But I think to be freedom absolutists, we need to understand this principle that I was talking about in this video, as well as probably other principles too. But I guess that's all I had to say about this. At least in this particular video. This has been Redshift. May peaceful, chaotic freedom reign, even though it won't be totally devoid of death.